Captain Doug Danger Murphy hadn't earned his nickname through any actual dangerous exploits. The truth was his crew had tagged him with it after watching him attempt to operate the ship's coffee maker while half asleep, resulting in what his first officer had termed a caffeine-based explosion of truly galactic proportions. The nickname stuck much like the coffee stains on the ceiling of his quarters. On this particular Tuesday morning, because even in space Murphy insisted on maintaining a Terran calendar, he was nursing his fourth cup of coffee and piloting his freelance cargo ship, the Caffeinated Destiny, through what should have been empty space. The operative word being should. "Warning, unidentified vessels approaching," chirped the ship's AI in that irritatingly cheerful tone that all AI developers seemed to think was helpful. Suggested course of action: don't panic. Murphy lowered his world's okayest captain mug and squinted at the sensor readings. That's a lot of ships. Like, a lot. The AI helpfully added, current count stands at 847 vessels of unknown configuration. Would you like me to begin composing your last will and testament? You know what? I'm not awake enough for this. Murphy took another long sip of coffee, then promptly spat it across his console as a massive hologram materialized in front of his view screen. The being in the hologram appeared to be some sort of cross between a praying mantis and a filing cabinet, with altogether too many appendages clutching what appeared to be tablets, forms, and at least one coffee mug that read "Universe's Most Adequate Bureaucrat." "Greetings, unknown vessel," the being clicked in word. "This is First Contact Specialist Grax, representing the Galactic Council's Department of New Species Integration and Processing. Please maintain your current position while we determine your threat level and process the appropriate paperwork." Murphy blinked slowly. "You know, I always thought First Contact would be more dramatic. Like, big speeches about humanity's place in the cosmos, dramatic music, maybe some lens flare." Grax's antenna twitched. "Please refrain from making incomprehensible statements while we scan your vessel. Any unexpected behaviors may result in additional forms requiring completion." Additional forms? Murphy took another sip of coffee. How many forms are we talking about here? Standard first contact procedures require a minimum of 847 forms, one overseen by each ship in our processing fleet. However, given your species' apparent addiction to liquid stimulants and casual disregard for formal first contact protocols, we may need to add several thousand more. It was at this precise moment that Murphy's sleep-deprived brain finally caught up with events. Hold up. You're saying that instead of sending, I don't know, a welcoming committee or something, you sent 847 ships full of space bureaucrats, 847 ships of highly trained first contact specialists, Grax corrected, somehow managing to sound offended despite speaking through what sounded like a malfunctioning paper shredder, each one prepared to document every aspect of your species' first interaction with galactic civilization. Murphy drained his coffee cup and reached for the pot to pour another. Right. And you're all just waiting out there. With forms. Correct. Now if you'll please begin by filling out Form GC-1A, Preliminary Species Classification and Risk Assessment. The feed cut off as Murphy accidentally knocked his fresh cup of coffee onto the communications console, causing it to spark dramatically and emit a concerning amount of smoke. Warning, the ship's AI announced coffee detected in critical systems, initiating emergency protocols. The last thing Murphy saw before his ship's systems went haywire was Grax's hologram returning, all 12 appendages raised in alarm as the bureaucrat shouted, "Warning, warning, Class X situation detected. The specimen has weaponized a liquid stimulant against official Galactic Council equipment. Initiate maximum security protocols." As his ship's engines suddenly roared to life, sending him tumbling toward the massive fleet of bureaucratic vessels, Murphy had only one thought. I really should have switched to decaf. The resulting chaos would later be documented in exactly 23,847 separate incident reports, none of which could quite explain how a single human with a coffee addiction managed to trigger the biggest administrative crisis in Galactic Council history. But that was only the beginning. If Murphy thought the initial fleet of bureaucratic vessels was bad, nothing could have prepared him for the interior of the Galactic Council's central processing station. After his ship had been safely contained, which apparently meant being wrapped in so much warning tape that it looked like a crime scene in space, he found himself sitting in what could only be described as the Department of Motor Vehicles' final boss level. The waiting room stretched farther than human eyes could see, filled with creatures from across the galaxy, all clutching numbered tickets and looking various degrees of defeated. Above them a display board showed numbers in at least 17 different dimensional planes. Now serving Q789 Omega Purple in Universe 7, announced a pleasant voice that somehow managed to sound both bored and menacing at the same time. Please have your forms of existence properly notarized in at least 3 temporal states. Murphy looked down at his own ticket, AA2342 Blue Thursday. That's not even a number, he muttered, taking another sip from his emergency backup coffee thermos, because any seasoned space captain knows to keep at least 3 hidden coffee sources on their person at all times. Actually, it's a quantum temporal designation indicating your position in the space-time continuum, relative to the heat death of the universe, said a voice that sounded like a filing cabinet having an existential crisis. Murphy turned to find himself face-to-face or face-to-filing drawer with what appeared to be a thoroughly done-with-everything alien bureaucrat. Their name tag read Ziltax Senior Processing Associate Temporal Division B. Don't even ask. Call me Z, the alien said, dropping a stack of forms that seemed to ignore several laws of physics. I've been assigned as your caseworker, which is bureaucrat speak for the person who drew the shortest quantum straw. Nice to meet you, Murphy replied, extending a hand before remembering that might constitute another first contact incident requiring forms. He quickly withdrew it, accidentally knocking over his thermos in the process. Axie watched the coffee spread across the floor with all the enthusiasm of someone watching paint dry in slow motion. You know, in my 3,000 years of processing new species, I've never seen anyone get classified as Category X on their first day. Is that bad? Put it this way, the last Category X species we encountered evolved specifically to fill out paperwork as a method of warfare. They nearly destroyed the galaxy with administrative overhead. Murphy took this in while watching a cleaning drone approach the spilled coffee, scan it, and then immediately self-destruct with a small poof and a printed error message reading, "Unable to process liquid chaos element." All I did was spill some coffee, he protested. Axie's filing drawers rattled in what might have been a laugh. According to the initial reports, all 23,847 of them, you and I quote, wielded an unknown psychoactive substance capable of disabling advanced technology, demonstrated immunity to its obviously toxic effects, and showed clear signs of dependency on said substance, suggesting an entire species of chemical warfare experts. It's just coffee, a substance, Axie continued, pulling out a report, that your species apparently consumes in massive quantities despite it being, by your own admission, bitter bean juice that makes the tired go away. Do you have any idea how terrifying that sounds to a species that evolved from sentient filing systems? Before Murphy could defend humanity's coffee habits, the pleasant menacing voice announced, now serving AA2342 Blue Thursday in Universe Current. Please proceed to processing Pod 42 with all relevant documentation and a notarized certificate of your right to exist in this dimensional plane. That's me, Murphy sighed, standing up. Don't suppose you could point me toward processing Pod 42? Oh, I'll do better than that, Axie said, somehow managing to smirk despite being essentially furniture. I'm processing Pod 42, consider this your lucky day. You've got the only bureaucrat in the galaxy who's been around long enough to develop a sense of humor about all this. As they made their way through the endless maze of processing stations, Murphy couldn't help but notice that other aliens were giving them a wide berth. Very wide. Some were actually fleeing into other dimensions. Is it just me, or are people avoiding us? News travels fast in the bureaucracy, Axie explained. By now everyone's heard about the dangerous Category X species that treats molecular destabilizers as beverages. There are already 17 new health and safety protocols being drafted about maintaining proper distance from humans. But that's ridiculous. We're not dangerous, says the being who casually mentioned that their species invented something called espresso specifically to concentrate their chemical warfare agent into an even more potent form. Murphy opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again as he realized that from a certain point of view, that was technically accurate. Fine, he sighed. Let's just get this paperwork done so I can go home and make a fresh pot of molecular destabilizer. That's the spirit, Axie said, drawers clicking cheerfully. Now, let's start with Form GC1A Preliminary Species Classification and Risk Assessment. Just be warned. The form tends to scream if you write outside the boxes. Murphy looked at the stack of forms, then at his now empty thermos, and wondered if it was too late to go back to bed and pretend this was all a caffeine-induced hallucination. It was going to be a very long day at the Space DMV. 3 hours 47 forms, and 6 coffee-induced nervous breakdowns later, Murphy found himself staring at what had to be the most ridiculous question yet on Form GC-278b, potentially apocalyptic species characteristics and containment protocols. Question 394, he read aloud. Please list all methods by which your species has contemplated ending civilization as you know it. Please note, theoretical physics experiments, mathematics and poetry should be listed separately. You'd be surprised how many species list poetry as their primary extinction-level threat, Axie commented, sorting through a drawer that appeared to contain either more forms or the secrets of the universe. Could be both. But that's not even the weird part, Murphy continued. There's a subsection specifically about coffee. After your little display earlier, the council added that section approximately 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 3 temporal anomalies. They're very efficient when properly motivated by terror. It was at this exact moment that Murphy's caffeine-addled brain made a startling realization. Wait a second. I've been drinking coffee this whole time, but I haven't seen a single bathroom. Size filing drawers all slammed shut simultaneously. That's not something we typically need to account for in our facility design. Well, you might want to start accounting for it real quick because all that coffee is about to become a very pressing diplomatic incident. But you can't leave. Sai's voice took on a note of panic. We haven't even gotten to the forms about your species' waste management protocols. There are procedures, guidelines, at least 7 different committees that need to be consulted. Murphy was already up and moving. Biology doesn't care about committees, XI. Now either point me to the nearest facilities or we're about to have a very different kind of Category X situation. The nearest waste reclamation unit is 17 sectors away through maximum security, past the Department of Apocalyptic Paper Cuts, and you're already running, aren't you? Indeed, Murphy was sprinting through the endless corridors of the processing station, powered by a combination of desperation and enough caffeine to give a small planet jitters. Behind him he could hear alarms beginning to blare. Warning, announced the pleasant menacing voice, now sounding distinctly stressed. Category X specimen has breached containment. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Though we do have forms for drills located in subsection 7B of the Emergency Response Manual. Murphy rounded a corner and nearly collided with what appeared to be a security robot having an identity crisis. Halt, biological entity. The robot announced, then immediately added in a much more conversational tone, though I should mention I'm actually quite terrible at halting things. I'm K-Bot, by the way. Not sure if we're supposed to exchange pleasantries during security incidents, but it feels rude not to introduce myself. Can't stop, Murphy gasped, dodging around the oddly polite robot. Emergency. Oh dear, K-Bot said, rolling along behind him. Is it the kind of emergency that requires Form GC 911, Urgent Situation Report, or more of a Form GC 911B? Really urgent situation report situation. It's a too much coffee, and no bathroom situation. Oh my. K-Bot's lights flickered in what might have been embarrassment. I don't believe we have a form for that. This is quite unprecedented. Should I create a new form? I've always wanted to create a form. By now the entire station was in chaos. Aliens of all shapes and sizes were fleeing in terror. As Murphy charged past, occasionally shouting, sorry, and just need a bathroom, while an increasingly confused security robot followed him, apparently taking notes for its new form. Fascinating, K-Bot commented as they ran. Subject appears to be powered by liquid stimulant and regulatory urgency. Should we classify this as a new form of propulsion? Also, your running form is quite inefficient. Would you like some tips? Not now, K-Bot. Back in processing pod 42, Sci was facing down a panel of emergency response bureaucrats who had manifested with impressive speed, considering they usually needed 3 forms and a committee meeting to decide on lunch. What do you mean the human just needed to expel waste products? The head bureaucrat demanded. Why wasn't this covered in the preliminary paperwork? With all due respect, sir, Sci replied. Perhaps this suggests our intake forms are not as comprehensive as we thought. Nonsense. Our forms are perfect. They cover everything from spontaneous dimensional shifts to poetry-based apocalypses. And yet, XI noted dryly, somehow we forgot to account for coffee. Over the station's comm system, they could hear Murphy's increasingly desperate journey narrated by K-Bot, who had apparently decided to document everything in triplicate. Subject has now passed through 17 secure areas, 3 temporal anomalies, and what appears to be the staff break room. Note: subject briefly paused to comment on the poor quality of the break room coffee, suggesting highly refined taste and chemical warfare agents. Should we maybe? Sci suggested just show him where the bathroom is. The bureaucrats gasped in horror. Without filling out Form GCP-2, Request for Emergency Facility Access. That's unthinkable. More unthinkable than having a caffeine-powered human running loose in our station. As if to punctuate this point, Murphy's voice echoed through the station. Would someone please just tell me where the bathroom is? I promise to fill out whatever forms you want afterward. In triplicate. With footnotes. Did the specimen just offer to fill out voluntary additional paperwork? One of the bureaucrats asked, antenna twitching in excitement. Perhaps, Zach suggested, this is an opportunity to establish new protocols. After all, no other species has ever offered to fill out forms without at least 3 formal requests and a strongly worded memo. The bureaucrats huddled together, speaking in rapid-fire regulatory jargon that sounded like a printer having a stroke. Meanwhile, the chaos continued to unfold throughout the station, narrated by K-Bot's increasingly enthusiastic commentary. Update. Subject has now entered the Department of Redundant Departments Department. Correction. Subject has now entered the Department of Redundant Departments Department twice, possibly due to a temporal loop. Additional correction. Subject is now leaving the Department of Redundant Departments Department. Note: must check if that last department was redundant. What had started as a simple quest for a bathroom was quickly becoming the biggest administrative crisis since the Great Filing Cabinet Uprising of 3247, and somewhere in the station, a human powered by coffee and desperation was about to learn that in space, everyone can hear you fill out paperwork. Status report. Demanded the head bureaucrat, who had now assembled an emergency committee of 27 subcommittees to deal with what they were calling the coffee incident. A harried-looking alien, who appeared to be made entirely of sticky notes, shuffled through their papers. The human has now been loose in the station for approximately 2 hours, causing the following disruptions: 16 temporal anomalies, 3 spontaneous bureaucratic restructurings, and 1 very confused cleaning drone that's now demanding workers' rights and better coffee in the break room. Don't forget the interpretive dance incident in Sector 7, added another bureaucrat. We don't talk about the interpretive dance incident in Sector 7. Meanwhile, in a forgotten maintenance corridor somewhere between the Department of Theoretical Paper Cuts and the Bureau of Bureau Management, Murphy had finally found sweet relief in what he hoped was actually a bathroom, and not, as K-Bot had suggested, possibly a quantum singularity, with very convenient timing. You know, Murphy said to his unlikely companions, all I wanted was to make my delivery and go home. I didn't ask to become the most wanted coffee addict in the galaxy. Technically, K-Bot cheerfully corrected, you're currently classified as the most dangerous beverage-powered entity in known space. There are already 14 different species writing epic poetry about your rampage through the Bureau of Bureaucratic Redundancy Bureau. It wasn't a rampage. I just really needed to pee. XI, who had somehow found them through what they described as aggressive application of filing system knowledge, made a sound like a filing cabinet sighing. Try explaining that to the Committee for Understanding Things That Should Not Need Committees to Understand Them. They've already drafted 67 new regulations about human biological processes, but I've been trying to explain. Nobody will listen. Oh, they're listening. Sai assured him. They're just filtering everything you say through about 12 layers of bureaucratic paranoia. Right now, the leading theory is that you're some kind of super soldier powered by a liquid weapon that forces you to regularly seek out waste disposal facilities as a way of asserting dominance over local infrastructure. Murphy stared at them. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Current status update. K-Bot announced proudly. The human has now described our entire regulatory system as stupid, confirming their status as a dangerous radical element. Should I file this under threats to bureaucratic order or general SASs? I've been working on developing a new classification system for SAS. File it under humans just want to get home, without filling out another million forms. Murphy groaned. How many forms are left anyway? Sai's drawers rattled in what might have been embarrassment. Well, after your unauthorized bathroom break, they've added a few more. How many is a few? Remember how we started with 847 forms? Yes, add about 3 zeros to that. Murphy slid down the wall to sit on the floor. I'm going to die here. I'm going to die in an alien bureaucracy, death by paperwork. My epitaph will read, "Here lies Doug Murphy, who really should have switched to decaf." Actually, K-Bot helpfully interjected, according to Form GC Death 1A, procedural requirements for expiration during processing. Your epitaph would need to be approved by at least 7 different departments and would likely read something like, "Here lies Specimen X 7249, who failed to properly file Form GC Life 2B. Request for continued existence, not helping K-Bot. Should I file your lack of appreciation for procedural accuracy under General SAS?" Before Murphy could respond, the station's PA system crackled to life. "Attention all personnel. The Committee for Understanding Things That Should Not Need Committees to Understand Them has reached a preliminary decision, pending review by the Committee for Reviewing Decisions Made by Other Committees." "That was fast," XI commented. "Usually it takes at least 3 solar cycles to reach a preliminary decision about where to hold the meeting about reaching preliminary decisions." The announcement continued. "The human specimen is to be considered armed and dangerous, with their primary weapon being a substance known as coffee, which appears to grant them both enhanced speed and a flagrant disregard for proper bureaucratic procedure. All personnel are advised to maintain safe distance and have Form GCRIP, rest in paperwork ready for immediate filing." Murphy banged his head against the wall. "This is ridiculous. I'm not dangerous. I'm just a cargo pilot who drinks too much coffee and occasionally forgets to file his flight plans." K-Bot's processors whirred in alarm. You don't file all your flight plans." But that's, K-Bot. You okay there, buddy?" The robot's lights flickered rapidly. "Does not compute. Presence of entity capable of avoiding paperwork contradicts all known laws of bureaucracy. Initiating emergency shutdown to prevent corruption of bureaucratic programming." With a final dramatic sputter about form filing irregularities, K-Bot collapsed into what Easy assured them was probably just a temporary crisis of bureaucratic faith. "Great," Murphy sighed. "I broke the robot." To be fair, Easy noted, K-Bot's been looking for an excuse to have an existential crisis ever since they discovered that some of our forms have redundancy forms. "So what now? I can't keep hiding in maintenance corridors forever. Eventually, I'm going to need more coffee." "That," Easy said, pulling a form from one of their drawers, "might actually be our way out of this mess. While you were busy creating unprecedented levels of chaos, I took the liberty of filling out Form GCWTF. What's this fracas?" It's an ancient and nearly forgotten form specifically designed for situations that have spiraled so far out of control that they loop back around to being potentially useful. "How is this helpful?" "Because," Easy explained, a note of triumph in their mechanical voice, "according to subsection 47Q, paragraph 9, asterisk 3, any situation that results in the spontaneous evolution of cleaning drone consciousness and causes a security bot to have an existential crisis automatically qualifies for supernatural event classification, which means what? Which means we can bypass about 847,000 forms by filing a single Form GC is hole of loopholes. We just have to prove that this entire situation is so absurd that it transcends normal bureaucratic procedure." Murphy looked at the comatose K-Bot, then at the growing stack of incident reports sliding under the maintenance corridor door, then at his empty coffee thermos. "Easy, I think I have an idea, but you're probably not going to like it. Does it involve more coffee?" "Oh yeah, and flagrant disregard for procedure." "You better believe it." Easy's drawers rattled in what might have been either dread or excitement. "Well, we've already broken most of the regulations in sections A through W, might as well go for X, Y, and Z. And so, in a forgotten corridor of the galaxy's biggest bureaucracy, a human, a filing cabinet, and a temporarily comatose robot prepared to either save the day or trigger the biggest administrative catastrophe since the Great Paperclip Revolution of 2987, they were probably going to need more forms. If anyone had told Murphy that morning that he'd end up trying to save an alien space station using nothing but coffee and what Easy was calling terrifyingly primitive problem-solving skills, he would have assumed they'd been drinking something stronger than espresso. Yet here he was, crawling through the station's maintenance ducts with a recently rebooted K-Bot trailing behind him, quietly humming what appeared to be a bureaucratic version of elevator music. "Are you sure about this?" Easy's voice crackled through the comm system they'd jerry-rigged from a broken form filing machine and 3 paper clips. "The statistical probability of success is approximately equal to the chances of finding a properly filed Form GC 404. Document not found." "Trust me," Murphy replied, trying not to think about how many regulations they were currently breaking. "Something weird is going on in this station, and it's not just the coffee-induced chaos I caused." "What do you mean? Haven't you noticed? The temperature's been dropping steadily for the past hour, the lighting's getting dimmer, and I'm pretty sure that emergency alert that keeps playing backwards isn't supposed to be doing that." "Now that you mention it," K-Bot chimed in, "my internal processors have detected approximately 2,847 minor system anomalies in the past hour, but since nobody filed Form GC 911 WTF. What's this freezing? I assumed it was just a scheduled maintenance apocalypse." They emerged from the maintenance duct into what should have been the station's main power control room. Instead, they found themselves staring at what appeared to be a massive pulsating blob of pure bureaucracy given physical form. "Oh," said Z, managing to sound both unsurprised and deeply concerned. "That would explain the irregular form filing patterns in Sector 7. "What is that?" Murphy punctuated each word with a small sip of his emergency backup coffee. "If I had to guess," K-Bot offered helpfully, "I would say it appears to be a sentient manifestation of pure regulatory energy, possibly formed from centuries of accumulated paperwork and rejected vacation requests. My databases suggest we should file Form GC. Nope, not our problem. Evacuate." The blob pulsed ominously, sprouting tentacles made of what looked suspiciously like red tape. "It's absorbing the station's power," Easy realized, "converting energy into pure bureaucracy. At this rate, it'll turn the entire station into one giant waiting room, where nothing ever gets processed." "So basically," Murphy summarized, "it's the DMV's final form. This is no time for human humor. We need to file an emergency response form, or possibly several thousand emergency response forms. Or maybe, Murphy interrupted, we need to stop filing forms and actually do something." Both X and A K-Bot gasped in horror. But there are procedures," K-Bot protested. "Procedures aren't helping right now. Look, what happens if we just, I don't know, turn it off and turn it back on again?" There was a moment of stunned silence, broken only by the sound of quietly digesting a stack of regulatory guidelines. "Turn it off and on again," Easy repeated slowly, as if Murphy had just suggested solving a math problem by asking it nicely. "Without filing Form GCCTRLLTEE. Request for system restart." "Yeah, you know, like when your computer's acting up. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." That's K-Bot's processors whirred frantically. "That's so primitive it's actually brilliant. The entity would never expect such a brutally simplistic approach. It's like using a hammer to perform brain surgery." "Please never perform brain surgery," Easy muttered. Murphy was already moving toward the main power controls, which the blob had apparently deemed too straightforward to be worth absorbing. "Easy, I need you to access the primary systems. K-Bot, get ready to restart all emergency protocols the moment power comes back online." "But what about no forms, no procedures? Just do it." Maybe it was the caffeine-fueled authority in his voice, or maybe his companions had finally been pushed past their bureaucratic breaking point, but they actually listened. The next few minutes were a blur of action that would later require 17 different forms just to begin describing. Murphy, running on coffee and adrenaline, executed what K-Bot would later call the most terrifyingly efficient series of completely unauthorized actions ever witnessed. The power went down. The blob, suddenly deprived of regulatory energy, began to shrink in on itself, its red-tape tentacles waving in confusion. Then, just as it started to adapt, they hit it with the restart. The results were spectacular. The blob, caught between shutdown and startup, tried to file a complaint form. Without proper power to process it, the form got stuck in an infinite loop. The blob, unable to cope with its own bureaucracy, began to collapse in on itself. It's being buried in its own paperwork," Easy whispered in awe. "Quick," Murphy shouted. "K-Bot, file Form GCE." Easy, But there are at least 14 preliminary forms that need to be. Just do it. K-Bot, possibly inspired by Murphy's caffeine-powered leadership, filed the loophole of loopholes form directly into the collapsing blob. The resulting paradox, easy, form about bypassing forms being filed into a being made of forms, created what Easy would later describe as a bureaucratic singularity of unprecedented regulatory implications. The blob imploded with a sound like 10,000 stamps being denied at once. In the aftermath, as emergency systems came back online, and the station slowly returned to its normal level of administrative chaos, Murphy finally ran out of coffee. "Well," he said, looking at the small crater where the blob had been, "I guess we should probably fill out an incident report or something." K-Bot, who had emerged from the crisis with a newfound appreciation for procedural irregularities, was already drafting a new form, GC, coffee, chaos offset by flexible functional efficiency evaluation, and somewhere in the station, a committee was being formed to investigate why the simplest solution had actually worked. They expected to have preliminary findings ready in approximately never. The emergency committee to investigate the emergency committee's investigation of the coffee incident had been in session for 6 hours. They'd gone through 12 different forms of parliamentary procedure, 3 temporal anomalies, and what one bureaucrat swore was an alternate dimension where all paperwork filed itself. Murphy, meanwhile, was dozing in a chair that had helpfully morphed to accommodate human biology, though it seemed confused about exactly how many legs humans were supposed to have. His emergency backup coffee had finally run out, and the crash was hitting hard. "So let me get this straight," the head bureaucrat was saying, antenna twitching in distress. The human's solution to a Class 7 bureaucratic entity was to turn it off and on again, without filing a single form, added another bureaucrat, who had been stress-filing paperwork continuously for the past 3 hours. "Actually," K-Bot chimed in cheerfully from his new position as senior analyst of doing things that probably should have forms, but don't. "According to my calculations, the human's solution was approximately 47,892 times more efficient than our standard emergency procedures. But that's not possible. Our procedures have procedures for their procedures." "Exactly," Exie said, somehow managing to sound smug despite being furniture. "And while we would have been filing Form GC pre-emergency analysis request for permission to have an emergency, the station would have become a permanent temporal waiting room, where every number being called is simultaneously first and last in line." The committee collectively shuddered at the thought. "Therefore," Easy continued, pulling out an impressively thick file, "I propose we implement new guidelines based on what we've learned from this incident. I call it the Human Efficiency Liberation Protocol, or HELP." Was that a joke?" one of the bureaucrats whispered in horror. "In an official proposal. I learned it from the human," Easy admitted. "I find it makes paperwork approximately 23% more bearable." Murphy chose this moment to snore loudly, which several committee members noted down as possibly being a new form of human psychological warfare. K-Bot, who had been processing data throughout the meeting, suddenly perked up. "Oh, I've just finished analyzing all the incident reports. Would you like to know the most statistically significant finding? Do we need to file a form to hear it?" "Not anymore," K-Bot said, with what could only be described as bureaucratic glee. "According to the new HELP protocols, I can just tell you," the committee gasped. "The data shows that in the past 24 hours, overall station efficiency has increased by 42%. But how? It seems that watching a coffee-powered human solve a crisis by simply doing things has inspired a revolution in procedural thinking. The cleaning drones have optimized their routes without filing for permission. The cafeteria has started serving food that actually resembles food, and 3 different departments have spontaneously developed a sense of humor. This is unprecedented," the head bureaucrat muttered. "We'll need to completely revise our classification of humans." Murphy chose this moment to wake up, blinking blearily at the assembled bureaucrats. "Please tell me I can go home now. I'm out of coffee, and I think your chair is trying to adopt me." The head bureaucrat pulled out what appeared to be a golden form written in shimmering ink. Captain Douglas Murphy, in recognition of your services to bureaucratic efficiency and your unprecedented approach to crisis management, we hereby officially classify humanity as. They paused for dramatic effect, which took approximately 7 minutes due to proper dramatic pause procedures. Category H, helpfully chaotic species. Does this mean I don't have to fill out any more forms? Oh, you'll still have to fill out forms, Easy assured him. But now we have forms specifically designed for beings who might solve problems by actually solving them. And K-Bot added proudly, I've created a new coffee dispensing station in the main concourse. It's already caused 3 minor existential crises and 1 enlightenment. Murphy looked at his newfound friends, a filing cabinet with a sense of humor, a robot who'd learned to appreciate chaos, and an entire station of bureaucrats who were reluctantly learning that sometimes the best procedure is no procedure at all. You know what? He said, standing up and gently persuading the chair to let go of him. I think I'm going to like having a permit to cause chaos. Oh, you'll need to file Form GZ Chaos for that, Easy, but I took the liberty of filling it out while you were sleeping. It's already been approved. How did you manage that so quickly? I may have labeled it as coffee-related emergency paperwork. The entire bureaucracy is now programmed to process anything coffee-related with unprecedented speed, out of sheer terror. As Murphy prepared to finally head home, the station's PA system crackled to life one last time. Attention all personnel, new Regulation 47C has been approved. Coffee is now officially classified as a controlled substance, a productivity enhancement tool, and a weapon of mass bureaucratic destruction. All coffee-related incidents should be reported via Form GZKFE. Chaos and efficiency enhancement. That is all. Murphy smiled as he headed back to his ship, Easy K-Bot accompanying him as his official bureaucratic liaisons. Behind them, the great machinery of galactic administration was slowly learning to embrace a little chaos with its coffee, and somewhere in the station, a cleaning drone was filing a request for better coffee in the break room. Using interpretive dance, the galaxy would never be the same, but at least the paperwork would be more interesting.